Susan Glaspell talks about how the old give way to the young. I discuss this and more on today's episode. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I've found in my travels. Today I want to talk about a short story because it is Short Story Tuesday, one that is about age and the passage of time. I am referring to At Twilight by Susan Glaspell, which was published in 1912 in her short story collection Lifted Mask. I've talked about Susan Glaspell on this channel before, so I don't need to go into that great of detail, but for those who don't know, she wrote a number of books, a number of short stories and plays, mostly plays. She was a journalist in her early career, writing about murders and other sorts of things, and she came from Iowa, which is relatable because I am also from Iowa. While her writings kind of fell out of favor over time, like they were rediscovered in the late 1900s, and people came to like her again, and I think she also won a Pulitzer for her writing at one time. So pretty good author. I've talked about A Jury of Her Peers before, which is one of the best short stories that I've ever read. Definitely recommend that you seek that one out. But without further ado, let's talk about At Twilight. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So At Twilight focuses on an old college professor in the spring. The narrator mostly talks about this professor, but at the beginning of the story we see that they're lecturing on philosophy, and they realize that it's a distracting day outside in the spring, very beautiful, so they let their students go early. There's a particularly strong focus of the professor on one of their students named Greta, who they seem to be interested in, kind of attentive towards, maybe have a friendship or something more with. And as Greta leaves, he hears a conversation happening between her and another student outside, where the student is talking about how the professor is old and doesn't have that much longer to teach, and he's hoping that Greta will defend him, which she kind of does, but not really to his liking, and so he's sad as a result, and he thinks about how his life has passed him by, and maybe how it wasn't ideal to teach this entire time, but he also realizes that maybe it was a good thing, and that he's ended up in a more positive place than he would have if he had done some other sort of career. And he then hands Greta a letter saying, "This is my resignation, I'm going to be resigning soon," and she is again somewhat sad. And he notes that it's time that he gave way for someone younger to come on by. So he can be sort of replaced. And as the story comes to a close, she notes, maybe it's not being replaced, maybe it's that he has had his career fulfilled, that he's been fulfilled, he's moving on to something else. The younger person will be grateful for the opportunity that has been opened up. And that's really where the story ends there. In terms of analysis, there's really not a lot to talk about with this story. The main theme that Glaspell is touching upon is the passage of life. Glaspell notes that the old have to maybe make way for the young, that the young will eventually replace the old. The professor has reached the end of his career, and he's a bit reluctant to leave because this is all that he has known. But it's something that needs to happen because the school and the students realize that he's had his time and he has to make way for someone else. There is an interesting quote that sort of recognizes this. Allow me to read it to you. "Looking things squarely in the face, and it was the habit of a lifetime to look things squarely in the face, he had not been long in seeing that they were right. Things tired him now as they had not once tired him. He had less zest at the beginning of the hour, more relief at the close of it. He seemed stupid in not having seen it for himself, but possibly many people were a little stupid in seeing that their own time was over." And so there's the professor kind of realizing that, he was stupid, or maybe he just wasn't willing to see what was staring him in the face, that his time has come, that he can no longer teach as he once did. And so it's just sort of a recognition that your life has reached a point where you can no longer work. So you see this in other ways as well. He focuses on the younger students. He thinks more about his accomplishments and more about how he needs to be replaced by someone who has a younger zest, much more diligent, or much more willing, and has a lot more energy to carry on with the things that they need to teach and do in a given day. But rather than simply feeling like this is being replaced, Greta points out that this is fulfillment, that this is your life has reached its conclusion. You have done everything that you can do. You are fulfilled. You have achieved what you wanted to achieve, what you set out to do. And you're not being replaced anymore. You are moving on so that another person can have the same opportunity that you had, which is a very beautiful way of thinking about it. But as I'll talk about in a few moments, it does feel vaguely authoritarian and kind of fascist in a way. But again, I'll get to that in a few moments. There is a lot of focus on Greta in this story. The professor seems very attentive to this young woman, and it feels kind of weird because it feels like love, like he's in love with Greta. Like he's hanging on her every word and wants her to defend him, and when she doesn't do it the way he wants, he feels a little bit sad. It could just be a friendship between a professor and a student, but the way it's written does feel like there's a sense of love, like a romantic love in a way. But it could also be another thing. It could be like the old versus the new. Like he sees the youth that Greta has and he wants that, and so of course he's gonna focus on her. And meanwhile, like she sees the wisdom and experience that he has, and she is kind of close to him as a result. And she also kind of sees that his life is nearing its end, and maybe there's that existential fear that, hey, one day this will also be me. So there seems to be a lot going on with this obsession with Greta. But there's also a recognition of value and worth that when Greta does sort of recontextualize things where it's like fulfillment rather than replacement, the professor feels a bit happier. Like, oh, the youth have officially recognized me as, someone worth celebrating, worth loving, and something like that. So they're not replacing me anymore. They're just recognizing my achievements, which is maybe what all of us really want. So it's maybe that's why there's that focus on Greta. It's that desire to be recognized and not simply replaced or anything like that. But as I've said before, this story does feel vaguely fascist. Like once you reach a certain age, you have no more value. If you have no more energy, you can't contribute to this capitalist society, and therefore you'll have to be taken outside and shot in the back of the head, which is probably not what they're going to do. Maybe I'm overreaching with this a little bit, but that does feel like the inherent sort of meaning of this story, like underneath it all. And it does feel like how we treat people in American society, especially maybe at the time Susan Glaspell was writing, where after you reach a certain point, you can no longer contribute anything to capital. Like you can't provide any more value because you have no more energy and you can't work and toil in the fields or anything like that. And so you got to give way to someone younger who has more energy so they can contribute and help the business and organization or the economy make more money. That's there. That's the underlying meaning of it all. That's the underlying meaning of people retiring in the first place. Retirement is a very capitalist concept because, prior to that, people just stopped working when they could no longer work, and we didn't apply meaning to it anymore. But as societies became more capitalist, we had to do something with the old people because if they continued to work, there'd be a loss of money. But I don't know, maybe that's just the socialist within me complaining about the capitalist system again, but it is there. Like, I feel like it's sort of layered underneath this story. Maybe Susan Glaspell was aware of it, maybe she wasn't, but it's still there in some capacity. Anyway, those are my thoughts on At Twilight by Susan Glaspell. An interesting short story, but one I don't think is really going to stick with me once I near the end of the month, or even further beyond that. I think Glaspell has written better short stories, better stories in general in the past, and this one is just sort of average. So I mean, it's worth seeking out. Definitely try to find it if you can. I'll put a link to it in the description, so just read that. Let me know what you think in the comments below if you want to have a conversation or something like that. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about this short story or Susan Glaspell if they don't already know about her. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and retirement-based travels. Farewell.